You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories about God speaking and his people having just enough faith to believe him and obey. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is episode 13. Well, hey friends, and welcome to this episode of Feathers. I'm so glad to have you with us today. I really hope that this podcast has been a blessing to you the same way that it's been to me. I shared on my blog this past week some of the things that God has been doing, including this podcast, the past couple months. So I would love for you to check that out at amyjbennett.com. Today, I'm so excited to have Michelle Krieg. She's actually an Australian who heard the episode last week with Lizzie Branch about her opening her art studio, and we had a little conversation about art therapy. And Michelle is actually a trained art therapist, and so she wondered if I wanted to interview her and her story about God moving her into that dream. And so, of course, I said yes. So I'm very excited to have Michelle here today. Michelle is a trained primary school teacher and an art therapist from South Australia. She has been teaching over the course of 20 years, and in 2010 decided to follow her God-given passion to study art therapy. After completing her study, Michelle started working as an art therapist with people who are socially marginalized due to mental illness. She also runs a small private art therapy practice called Art Felt Ventures and still teaches school when she can. Michelle is married to James, who works full-time in ministry to university students, and they have 3 children, aged 20, 17, and 14. And guys, it was such just an honor to talk to Michelle. She has been an encouragement to me in my writing over at my blog, and now I can just see we are going to be sisters in Christ, and I just love her. You'll see what a blessing she is when you hear the interview. So would love for you to listen to it, and here is my conversation with Michelle Krieg. Michelle, welcome to Feathers today.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's just lovely to be here.
Oh, gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you today. Let's get started first. How about you introduce yourself and your family?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle Krieg, and I live in South Australia, which is a long way away from America, where most of your listeners might be. And I have 3 children, and they are 20, 17, and 14. And I have a husband, of course, who is a very dear man, and we're a family who live and work and grow and play together.
Oh, I love that. And so, of course, everybody knows that I'm just entranced by your accent. I'm so excited to have somebody from Australia. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so tell me again, what part of Australia are you in?
So I'm from South Australia, which, of course, is in the south. It's in the middle part of Australia, so I'm sure most people know what Australia looks like. It's a really, really huge it's got a huge landmass, I guess, and we're in the sort of central part, but down the bottom. And I live in Adelaide, which is the capital city of South Australia. And we have weather probably a bit like California. I think California has been sort of likened to be like a similar sort of climate. So it's quite dry. Is that right, Amy? I know you live in North Carolina, but to your knowledge, is California quite dry heat? Not too.
Yeah. So I'm in South Carolina on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And California is way, way, way over on the West Coast. I have never been there, so I can't say for sure. But yeah. So when I do think of California, I think of like the beaches, dry heat, beautiful weather all the time. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we have pretty hot summers, dry summers, and really cold. Like at the moment, I'm freezing. I've got a jacket on, and I'm freezing.
Oh my goodness! So you guys are transitioning to winter, or are you in winter?
We're transitioning to winter. Yeah, so it's pretty cold. Yeah.
Okay. We're hot here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, it's been probably in the 80s this week. So we're getting our pool ready. I think I finally got our water clear. So I am so looking forward to it. Oh my gosh.
I wouldn't know what 80s is because we measure, I think, in is it Celsius?
Oh, yes.
We're 18, 17, 16, 15 degrees. So I don't know.
I can't do that kind of math.
Nor can I. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is.
I don't either. We don't know how to compare ourselves at this time. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so you guys, that's actually is it right on the coast, right?
Yeah.
You're near water.
Yep, we are near water, but we live in the hills. So our house is inland. We live in the Adelaide Hills, which is, a good half an hour from the beaches. So we're very lucky because Adelaide has great proximity to beaches and also the beautiful hills as well. So we live in a beautiful environment. We live in an almost country environment, but I'm 5 minutes from, the shops, but I live up a hill, so you've got to drive up this beautiful road, and I'm sort of in this lovely, tranquil, serene environment. Just stunning.
Oh my gosh, I really do have to come visit you.
I'd love you to come, Amy.
Oh my gosh.
We have koalas galore in our garden because we have lots of eucalyptus or gum trees, and we just have so many koalas that it's sort of like, oh yeah, koala, which sounds really, ungrateful, but you get a bit.
So like you just have koala just like hanging out like birds. I mean, they're just there.
Yeah. And they make noises.
I can't even imagine.
They make noises and drive my dog nuts.
Oh my goodness. So do they stay? I think the only thing I could kind of like think about that is we have deer.
Oh yeah.
Roam around. That we've had them like in our front yard, and our dog will go and chase the deer.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road or whatever. But that's really, and we have to stop because deers are always crossing. But yeah, we don't have koalas, we have deer.
Yeah, no, we have quite a lot of koalas because we live in a region in the hills where there's lots of gum trees, and our yard has got quite a lot of native Australian plants. And yeah, up in this region that we live, it's very common to see koalas.
And kangaroo?
Yeah, do you know we had kangaroos are not as common. You can see them occasionally, but we did have a 6-foot kangaroo jumping around next door.
What?
Yes.
I can't imagine. Oh my gosh.
It was bizarre. I looked over the fence and I saw this huge kangaroo, 6 foot, jumping around in my neighbour's yard. And we have big, like I'm on a half an acre, and we have big blocks. And I was just so freaked out. My dog was going crazy.
There's nobody you call or anything. Like they just.
Well,
eventually...
I rang a friend, and I just said, I can't believe there's a kangaroo next door. And I tried ringing the next door neighbours, but they weren't home. And this kangaroo would obviously just bounce away. It's quite rare. We don't see kangaroos a lot. They must live in the bush areas and then just come occasionally down to, I don't know, eat something, or I don't know. It was huge. It was scary.
So do they pose any threat at all? Or
if you get too close to a kangaroo, they could kill you. And what happens is if you're driving at dawn or dusk, they can jump across the road and you can bang into them in your car and have a big crash. And yeah, they can pose a danger on the roads and totally mangle your car. But not many people would do anything to a kangaroo. They just sort of like avoid them. Probably a bit like deer, but they're not very.
That's exactly like deer, except we go hunt them. But the ones that are just out and about, you just try to be really careful. And they have signs up, deer crossing and stuff,
yes.
So you can be aware.
So
you guys have kangaroo crossing?
We have warnings that kangaroos are more populated in that region. People do eat kangaroo meat over here.
Okay.
I don't eat it very often. I find it quite tough, but it's meant to be very healthy. So yeah, it's bizarre. And we have an echidna. They look like hedgehogs. They look like little hedgehogs. Do you know what I mean by hedgehogs?
I do.
Those
yes.
Spiky animals.
Yes.
We have a sort of an Australian equivalent, and we've had one of them in our garden, but they're not as common either. So. Yeah, we haven't had a wombat in our garden, but we've had an echidna, koala, and a kangaroo nearby, so pretty amazing.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like a wildlife sanctuary.
It is. I feel like I'm watching National Geographic or something. Steve. What was his name? Steve?
Irwin,
yes.
Yeah.
So we were big fans of him here in the States. And so that's what I think about when you're talking about all of these animals.
How bizarre.
Oh, my gosh. Good times. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so, wow, I could talk forever about that, but let's transition into your story for today. And your story really is about you transitioning from being now this is an Australian American translation. So you call it a primary school teacher, which in Australia is K through 7th grade. So that would be like elementary / middle school here. So you were a teacher, and then transitioning to an art therapist. And let me just give a little background. Last week, I talked to Lizzie Branch, who owns an art studio, and I ended up talking about how I had written a novel and was just interested in art therapy. That's not what Lizzie does. But you, Michelle, were listening, and they're like, oh, my goodness, I'm an art therapist.
Yes.
Wonder if she would want to talk to me. And of course I would. So, so this is a episode we're recording after Lizzie's episode has aired, and just as a kind of like a follow-up from last episode, which is really exciting for me. I can't wait to talk about this. So, you're going to share a little bit about your transition and your faith and obedience through that, and then we can talk a little bit about the art therapy. So, I would love for you to jump in and share your story.
Okay. Well, many years ago, when I was doing my first degree, I was studying psychology, and I was thinking that I was meant to be a child psychologist. So I was in my late teens and at university, and pretty sure that that's where God wanted me to go in terms of my career. And in my last year of my undergraduate degree, my arts degree, majoring in psychology, I realised that I felt a bit young to be a child psychologist, and I was going to have to do a few more years of study yet. I got into an honours program, which is like, a 4th year on top of an undergrad, and I was going to head off in the psychology direction, and I felt God was saying, no, I want you to be a teacher. So I became a teacher, and I loved it. But I felt something was missing. And one day I was praying when I was planning my class lessons for the day, and I felt God was saying, I want you to ask the children to write stories, but I want you to do a lesson where you play music. And this was really quite a challenge because I was teaching in a very lovely conservative Christian school. And I realised that sometimes people can see that as a bit alternative. But I thought, no, I'll do it. So I chose a very well-known song or piece of music. And it was called Pachelbel's Canon. And I played it. I said to the children, look, I want you to imagine that this is a soundtrack to a movie. But I want you to write the story that goes with this. And they listened to this piece of music, and I also said to them, think of the mood changes in this music. There's going to be some slow, fast bits. There's going to be some happy and sad bits. But you can decide what bits are happy and slow. I'm not going to tell you, which parts mean what. It's up to you to hear the music and think of the story that might go with them. Because up to that point, they'd been writing things like one day so-and-so went, or once upon a time, or on the weekend. I was getting just a little bit too set in their ways. And anyway, I played this music and I thought, oh yeah, I'll listen to it with them twice and then they can write their stories. Well, they wanted the whole CD on, the whole of Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach's music. And they wrote with the music playing, and their stories were so heartfelt and so meaningful, and I just bawled. I just cried when I got them, and I just realised the power of an art form to evoke emotion and evoke expression of emotion. And so I had one little girl write about how her parents had recently separated and that it had been really hard at first, but now she had 2 homes to live in, and there was less conflict between the parents. And she said although she was really sad and she wanted them to be together, it was a bit happier for her. And this is how the music went. It sort of starts off sad and then it becomes more bright in the end. And then I had a little boy write that his grandfather had died and he was very sad, but as he saw the coffin being lowered into the grave, he saw the sun shining through the trees, and he knew that that was God's way of saying that his grandfather was in heaven. And so,
how old are these children?
These were 8-year-olds.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. So I thought, my goodness, this music, just normal classical music from hundreds of years ago that people have at their weddings, was just inspiring these kids. And so, you know, I didn't do it every week. I just decided to, in my teaching, use different prompts or triggers, you know. So I would have, you know, I had a lesson when I took a beautiful painting in and said, write the story that goes with this painting. And, you know, you had some trees in the foreground with a farmhouse in the back, and, you know, who lives in the house. And then I, you know, brought lavender and cinnamon and lots of sensory type smells into the classroom. And they wrote about, you know, lavender bushes and apple pies and grandmas, and, you know, so it just inspired a lot of creativity. And I thought, you know, I want to do this as a job.
Yeah.
So, you know, I taught for a number of years and I had 3 kids, and I just thought, you know, there's more that I could do possibly in this area. And I was praying, and I found out that there was something a bit like this called art therapy, which is when you use an art form like music or dance or, you know, drawing or painting or sculpting or whatever to express and explore emotions. And I thought I'd like to study that. And so I think I had just 2 children at the time. I've got 3. And I talked to a friend, and she mentioned a certain course in Melbourne, and that's in another state. I live in South Australia. Victoria is another state and the city that the course is being offered in. It's called Melbourne. It's quite a, you know, big city in Australia. And so it's another state. And I wrote to them and they said, you know, you'd have to come and study in Melbourne. And of course that wasn't possible. So I had my 3rd child, and I still felt God really putting on my heart to follow this desire. And so when my little girl, my last child, was, you know, about, about 12, I just said to my husband, it's still in my heart. And I just really felt that the course in Melbourne was the right course. At the same time, I was working in a school doing pastoral care for children, and there was a little girl who had a certain issue, and it meant because this child was suffering a certain issue, it meant that I had to phone someone who was helping her at the time, and that was an art therapist. So I rang this particular lady who was an art therapist, and I talked to her, and she said, look, I actually run short courses in Adelaide, you know, 3-month courses. Would you like to come and just have a dabble and just find out a bit about art therapy? And I did, and I absolutely loved that sort of course. It was sort of like workshops. It wasn't a university course or a recognised course. And I said to my husband, this is the next step. You know, I'll do this course and then see. And so sure enough, in 2009, I did that short course. And then I said to my husband, I'd love to do something to start studying in 2010. And there was a course available where I live in Adelaide, but it was just a fledgling course at the time. And I really thought the Melbourne one was right. And I was talking to my brother, and he said, oh, Michelle, we're actually moving to Melbourne. And I said, oh, and he said, you know, maybe they might have intensives. I don't know if you have them in America, Amy, but when you do sort of your course in short bursts, like concentrated bursts, rather than attending every day or a few times a week, you do 4 or 5 days of really intensive training. And my brother said, maybe, you could come over and stay with us and do those intensives as part of, training. And I contacted the course provider and they said, yeah, we do art therapy intensives. And what was more amazing was that it was literally 5 minutes by car from where my brother and his wife were going to live.
Wow. So
I said to my husband, this is just amazing. And my brother is a doctor and he was only in Melbourne for 2 years, 2010 and 2011. And that's how long the course was.
Oh, my gosh, it was perfectly timed.
It was amazing. So I would go over 4 times a year for 5 days and really intense, 9 to 5 type stuff and really soak in everything I was learning. And then between those intensives, there was a lot of communication with all the students and lecturers and stuff, doing assignments and discussion. And it was just amazing that my brother and his wife and family happened to live literally the next suburb from the course provider, and I could walk there. It was a 20-minute walk. And it was just, after years and years of, after a good 15 years of having this on my heart, I began to study there. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing how that worked out. And that's a long time to have a dream.
It was a long time, and sometimes I just thought, no, this is too hard. I've got 3 children, and even starting that was hard because I think my oldest was about 15. And
I was going to say you would have a teenager, so I'm sure you had doubts about that.
Yeah, I had a 15-year-old, and I had a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So it was juggle, and I felt, I was literally spending a month away from home. If you counted up all the days, that felt a long time to be away. But and then I had to study, and then I was working as well. So I was studying. Yeah, but I wasn't working full time. I was just working part time and studying part time. Yeah, so it's part time study. It wasn't full time. But I have also, obviously this was a degree that you'd graduate diploma because I've got my other 2, but it's education and an arts degree. So
you do actually have an arts degree separate from this?
Yeah, but the arts degree I have is not a fine arts. It's like I studied psychology, anthropology, English and German. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the art, now that's another thing because my grandmother was she's just extremely old. She's 98 and she was an amazing artist. She actually isn't painting or doing anything like that anymore, which is really sad. She's an incredible artist. My gifts are more in facilitating that, and I do my own dabbling and painting, but certainly nothing like, I wouldn't say I'm an amazing fine artist, although I'm very artistic when it comes to words, with images and just, I guess helping people work through their own artistic things. But I'm not going to call myself a fine artist or an artist in that sense of word. But I'm an art facilitator and someone who's very in touch with art concepts. Mm.
That's so interesting. So how did you after you got done with these intensives, how did you transition and when did you transition from being a teacher to art therapy? Yeah,
well, look, I'm still teaching. I work in a relief teaching capacity, which is when, someone's sick, I'll teach. So I'm still keeping up my teaching because I find teaching extremely helpful in terms of just keeping me in touch with people and kids and things. Now, how did I transition? I went overseas. It was it was a very hard time. I went overseas at the end of 2011. I took my son, who just graduated from high school, because I said to him, we can't all afford to go as a family, so I will take you over to see your uncle. That's my brother. By that time, he'd moved to Scotland, so he was no longer in Melbourne. And I said, I'll take him, take you over there and we'll go via Paris and London. And this took a lot of saving up financially, and so my son and I were gone for 3 weeks, and my husband and I have sort of said that we will do something special at the end of their high school with each child. So my husband or myself, so probably my husband will be the next one to do something. And so I took my son, and we travelled heaps and had a great time, and it was very intense. And, you know, when you're travelling, it's pretty full on. And then we came back, and I had a pre-existing back injury, and somehow I put my back out, and I was in bed for 4 weeks and couldn't really move or do anything, and was very frustrated. And this was the time when I was meant to be looking for work as an art therapist. So I was very, very frustrated, and I was really having to call out to God and say, look, I'm just in such pain, and I want to get on with life and what's happening. And it was a very, very hard time. I felt very flat, felt very down, and I guess that's given me a bit of an insight into some people's struggles. But then I rang a friend who works in an organisation to help people who've got mental health issues, and I said, do you happen to have any scope or opening for me to do voluntary work just to start out? And she said, no, I think, Michelle, we can find you a position. Ooh. So, so I started working with this organisation, and we work with old people who are very lonely or socially isolated, and often their family live interstate, or they've lost contact with their family for certain reasons, and they don't have any friends, and they get referred to our service. And my colleague and I run art therapy groups. So we'll get a group of older people together. They all from all different walks of life, and we do activities with them which promote their recovery and their self-worth, because we want them to get in touch with some of the strengths that they may have accessed when they were, you know, in their prime and they've forgotten about. So we do a number of creative activities which are like metaphors or symbolic sort of things for them to get in touch with who they are, and with a view of them moving on after the group into community work, or into another community group, or following an interest. Like they might find an interest that they've suddenly forgotten about, that they want to learn violin, or, you know. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
No, you are. I'm fascinated. Okay, so you made this transition and to do this work, which is, it sounds just beautiful. I'm glad there's people out there like you that are helping individuals like that. And so you transitioned. Did you do that full time, or is that something that you did kind of like on the side?
With my course?
Yes.
My study?
Well, after the job that she said that they could put you in, the position.
Oh, no, the job was part-time.
Okay.
And so the job is 1 day a week, and I've also got since then I've got another job working for another organisation, which is another day a week. So I've got 2 days a week where I'm doing art therapy with different client groups, and also see clients one morning a week as well. And then I teach probably every couple of weeks. I might teach 1 day. So I'm working about 2.5 days a week. But those days take a lot of, for every activity that I'm preparing, it takes, more preparation on another day as well. So, yeah, it's quite intense work. And I'm with the teaching as well. I'm looking at about 2.5 to 3 days a week, and for me, that's enough. Yeah, with a family.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just love that. So all of it was worth it.
It was all worth it. It was just so worth it. And the interesting thing, and I don't know if this will help other people, is that, I originally wanted to go into psychology and be a psychologist, and then obviously was led to teaching. And then it's almost like I've come around full circle, because a lot of the aspects of art therapy have a psychological sort of, I don't know, feel to them. Mm-hmm. And I'm older and more experienced now, and I've lived a bit more of my life, and I just feel a bit more confident about that role. And a lot of my teaching is of great value in my art therapy, especially in the facilitating, because I tend to like group therapy, which is what I love the most. When you get groups together and you looking at things as a group, you know, you're still doing your own individual thing, like you might be decorating a box about who you are, or lino cutting, you know, sort of making imprints into lino, which is like rubbery. You know, do you have lino in America? I don't know if you have lino.
No, that doesn't sound, I'm so not artsy at all, but I don't, well, that doesn't sound familiar.
It's like a rubber tile. So you're cutting into shapes into a rubber tile, and that could be indicative of you forging a new path in your life. You know, let's create a new path. Let's dig out a new path. Let's draw the path. So, and that is indicative of stepping out and having a go and being open to new possibilities. So each activity within the group that I facilitate with my colleague has a symbolic, almost parabolic application. So it is a bit like a parable, but you're doing a parable in an art form. So,
oh my goodness. So I would love, if you feel okay with that, I would love for you to share maybe a story of one of your clients. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you can give me an example of one of those sessions, and then what someone might realize or have an aha moment about from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me think. Okay, there is a story that I've been given permission to share with my colleague, and I spoke at a conference, so we did this particular story in public, so I can share it with you. We had a client who had a stroke, and he'd been he was in his, I think, early 70s or late 70s, and he had worked in a very high profile position in the government, so quite a respectable career for many years with one particular organisation, and he was, you know, obviously doing really well in that career. Then he had this stroke, and you can imagine how hard that was for him to grapple with. His wife was still working. She was obviously a professional lady, and he came to our group, one of our groups, and he was a quieter man and very genteel, and the rest of the group were all women. So I said to my colleague, I said, oh, it must be very hard for so-and-so. I'll call him Bob. His name wasn't Bob. It must be hard for Bob because, you know, he's in this group full of women and some of them were very expressive and very opinionated. And I thought, I just wonder how he's going to go. Well, he stayed for the whole 8 weeks of the group. Every week he'd come. And one of the activities we did was we gave every client or every participant a big lump of clay. And we said, look, if you were to think of an animal that you admired, I'll start again. If you were to think of an animal that might represent where you are in your life right now. So, for example, some people might make a snail because they're feeling very sluggish. That's a bit twee, that example, but it's just one example. Or some people might make, a kangaroo because they're really bouncy and happy. But we said we want you to think on a deep level about this animal. We know that this activity could be seen as almost childlike, but it is something where you're really thinking about what sums up your life and some of your struggles at the moment. And then we want you to make an animal after that represents where you'd like to be by the end of the group. Anyway, so this was about week 4, and it's an 8-week group. And in week 4, this Bob chap made for his first animal about where he was at the time, representing himself. He made a dog, a cowering dog, like a dog sort of looking down, and its nose was on the ground and its eyes were sort of looking up. And it was all slinky and he said, that's how I feel now, because, you know, I feel that I don't have much control over my life. And, you know, he felt obviously a bit beaten down by his circumstances, having had a stroke. He was still able to talk, he was able to move, but he'd been through a lot. He could no longer work in that particular profession anymore. And then, so in the same session he made that and he explained what he'd done. And then he said, but by the end, I want to be, and he'd made a proud seal, a seal that had its head up looking, you know, upwards. And that was just extremely moving, that he had this sort of aspiration. And at the end of the group, you know, we talked to him and I said, how do you feel? Do you feel like the dog that you made, or do you feel more like the seal? And he said, I feel more like the seal. And he said, because I've got new direction and hope, and he'd been able to get in touch with more community groups that he was interested in pursuing, and was getting out and about more, and he'd made new friends. And it was just really encouraging. So that's, I guess, the sort of thing that happens through the course of these groups is that people form friendships and realise they're not the only one who's had strokes or is battling depression or anxiety. And they can all help each other, but they can explore their emotions within this safe environment of doing an activity, and they don't have to share what they don't want to share, you know. So
I love that. I love that it's because we just talked about community, actually. What is it, 2 episodes ago? And how important that is. I love that. And I love that the art really gives them something tangible.
Yes.
To be able to speak what maybe they can't say.
That's exactly right. It is a voice for them.
And so do you guys do separate, is there like counseling involved, or is it really just the act of doing the art?
Well, it's the act of doing the art, and which evokes such emotions and can be extremely powerful. I think we have access to counsellors that, we both, my colleague's not a counsellor, and I've done some counselling training, but my focus is really on the art and them getting in touch with their emotions through that, and we encourage them to reflect on the session and to seek professional counselling to go alongside this. But normally we find that these people, because they're all sharing with each other, you know, their problems are often, we're not encouraging them to access those deep emotions, like, you know, we wouldn't really want them disclosing things about some traumatic abuse and that sort of thing.
Right.
We want them to, that's probably not the right context for the group, but we are there to point them in the right direction of someone who could help them in that regard. We haven't had anyone have a meltdown to this. We've run this group quite a number of times. We haven't had that happen, and we try and keep everything very safe. And if someone's starting to look like they're very emotional or whatever, we would certainly have a plan of attack and know what to do. We've had people cry and people, you know, be a bit teary or, you know, come to some amazing aha revelation, but we haven't had anything too intense because we're trying to keep the focus more on mental health and coping with life as it is now, and we would really want those deeper issues to be dealt with in a one-to-one session with a counsellor that they feel comfortable with.
So, Michelle, how do you think that faith plays a part in this work that you do?
Well, I guess for me, I'm sort of restricted in that I cannot share my faith openly, but because we're talking about quite deep issues of life, like dealing with loss, with grief, unpredictability and change, trying to grow in hard times and become resilient, all those things lend itself to conversations which the participants might bring up in the context of the group, and they may mention their own faith or their way of dealing with some of these hard times. And I can agree with them and say to them, yes, I can understand why prayer or going to church or God is of great comfort to you. And I can say I feel the same, but I obviously can't go into more detail because that is not something that we're encouraged to do in certain organisations. In Australia, we have to keep things quite separate. But I pray a lot for my participants, and also I think I get a lot of inspiration just from praying to God about particular activities. God will often give me an idea of what I can do with people, and I do feel it is a bit like a parable. And also I myself have to have faith because, it's a process where you don't know what's going to happen in a session. You don't know if things are going to go well or not. And it's really living on the edge because you could give a lump of clay to someone and they could throw it across the room. Mm-hmm. So this, I'm not touching this stuff. That hasn't happened, but we've had people not want to. We had one lady in a group that we ran, and this particular group that we were running had some quite significant disabilities in the group. And this one lady, she didn't want to do anything we planned. She would just sit there, and she was quite happy to sit there. She just said, I just want to sit here and observed, and we let her. And then, but when it came to the clay, we took out the clay, she started moulding it and making something with it. So you can never know what artistic form or medium is going to work. And so I have to constantly be praying to God and saying, I leave this session with you, and whatever happens. So it's in a way, He's the creator, mm-hmm. and He has created lots of things, and I just have to entrust the creative activity with the creator. You know what I mean? And mm-hmm. and just ask. To me, it feels like such a holy work, even though you can't really label that, but just being able to hold that space for them. That's exactly right. Holding the space. Yeah.
Yeah. That just feels like holy work, and just being able to get people in touch with those emotions, and then really leading them to find the source and the true healing, mm-hmm. Through Christ. Mm-hmm. And they may or may not, find it that way. But I would hope that the Christians that you come in contact with would seek that true healing.
Yes. And they do. And I think the fact that my colleague is a Christian too, and I think the fact that we can talk about, in our own planning and just privately, we can talk about our own faith, my colleague and I together. And of course we cannot, unfortunately, that, we do need to keep that obviously separate with what we plan, but we do pray. I do pray for people, and I know that my colleague would be too. And it's just a very special space for these people to feel safe. And my colleague and I have been friends for many years. We were actually friends at university when I did my first degree. So she's known me for a long time. So we work together really well. Part of the wonderful thing about it is that my colleague and I just get along so well, and we know how the other one works. So it's a very safe, unified environment. And we've just had a lot of people say to us that how positive it's been, and how much more confident and happy they feel to pursue other things, because we see this group as a stepping stone. Because a lot of people who are isolated or marginalised because of mental health issues like depression and anxiety and stress and stuff like that, they don't have the confidence to attend a group normally. It's just too overwhelming. They think, what if I'm going to have a panic attack? But because this group it has people running it who are able to deal with those things, then we are very mindful of that, and we actually pick them up. So we'll have people transport them there. We provide morning or afternoon tea, and that gets them coming, in a way that in a routine. And then as a result, we've had some people now do voluntary work in charity shops, or start joining another community group like bowls or knitting or painting,
Mm-hmm.
Get them out into the community again instead of watching TV.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mm.
That's so good. So, Michelle, as you think about your journey through this, do you have any scripture that you would like to pull out and maybe encourage people with?
Sure. Well, I guess 1 year ago was a well-known one, Jeremiah 29:11-13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. God gave it to me many years ago, and I've really had that as a special verse in my heart. And then more recently, in the last few years, these verses have meant something to me. Psalm 37:3-7. Do you want me to read them out, Amy?
Yes, please.
Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. And then there's Revelation 3:8-10. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. And the most recent verse, which is the last one I'll share, has been one that God's given me this year. Isaiah chapter 58:8. Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Well, that was beautiful. So they're the verses that speak to me, because they seem to be speaking of trusting God, of knowing that he will guide, knowing that he sees how we are, the state we're in, and that he is protecting us and guarding us and helping us with what he wants us to do.
Mm-hmm. And I love it. I'm just hearing the theme of light.
Oh, yes,
the
that's
sun
true.
and the dawn and
yeah.
And so it just makes me think of the verse, he's a lamp unto my feet, just as you're saying, that he shows us the steps that we need to take.
Yeah,
that's Psalm 37. Those Psalm 37 verses are actually a couple of the verses that God has given me these past couple months too. So those are special.
It's very interesting you say that about the light, because a number of years ago when I was, and this is relevant to the story, when I used to run a lot prior to having a back injury. I used to run nearly every day. And I was running one day and I was praying to God and saying, look, I really want to know what's going to happen. Do you want me to go down this art therapy path or not? And I was running in the hills where we live, and it's very foggy, so I could only see a metre ahead. And I felt God was saying, you can only see a metre ahead, but I see beyond the fog. I'm the lamp unto your feet and light to your path. You just need to see a little way in front of you, not the whole way. Yes, it's interesting you talk about the light, because the light has been a big feature, that whole concept. Thank you for bringing that out.
Mm-hmm. I got chills as you were telling that story. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I've just so enjoyed our time together. I know it's early on a Sunday morning when we're chatting for you, so I really appreciate you taking that time.
Thank you, Amy. I've just loved talking to you as well.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Michelle. You can see how sweet she is. I just love talking to her. There's a couple things that I took from her story, and specifically that how long it took for that dream to come to life. So 15 years she had to wait. So I hope that encourages those of you that might have a dream in your heart and you're just wondering where God is and why he's not seeing that desire. I just pray that you are encouraged that he does see those and that he will make it happen in his time and in his way. Also, more than that even when God began to move the pieces for her to do this, that she still experienced fear and doubt about how to do it and whether to do it. So I hope that encourages you if there's a dream that God's put on your heart and it's something that you really, truly desire to do, but just living it out is causing you some anxiety. I just pray that you are encouraged that you can trust God and that you can step out in obedience and follow through. As you heard from her, she says all the hard work and time away from her family was worth it. So I think we can move forward in those obedient steps, and God will be with us every step of the way. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Hop over to featherspodcast.com and leave Michelle a comment, and we would love to have you over there, get any feedback that you might have for us just to make this more valuable for you. Totally open. And also, if you have a story that you think would fit on the podcast or know somebody that has a story, I would love to hear about it. You can email me. It's my email's over on featherspodcast.com, and we'll see you next time on Feathers.